What's up guys, Tyrion521 back for another LEGO custom painted minifigure showcase, and in this one we have my LEGO Game of Thrones custom painted minifigures part 2. This is a continuation of the showcase that I did back for the season 6 premiere back in early 2016. I was looking back recently at those old Game of Thrones figures, and I kind of realized that compared to my modern stuff, they were definitely some of my weaker figures. So back in, I think it was like December, I decided to watch through the entire series again, leading up to, of course, the 8th and final season, which is going to conclude tonight. And I decided to just completely go back and revamp and re-update all my old figures, and then add a couple of new characters into the roster. And I'm really happy with how these guys turned out. Season 8, I know Season 8 has been a mixed bag for some people. I personally really enjoy it. There's elements of the writing that I will admit aren't as strong as previous seasons. But I think in particular, Episode 5, I think was way too underrated. I honestly loved Episode 5. I think it's one of my favorite episodes of the entire series. And it's really a shame to see so much hate fall onto a series that once seemed almost untouchable. But personally, like I said, I really enjoy it. You know, there's elements of it that, you know, are kind of hit or miss, but overall I think it's been a pretty solid final season for the show that we've all spent years watching, and I'm very intrigued to see how it concludes tonight. So we've got 9 new figures in this showcase, and let's get started right away with Jon Snow. Starting off is Jon Snow, of course, who I've kind of figured since season 6 is like our protagonist of the series. You know, he's always kind of felt like a piece of the puzzle, you know, since like seasons like 1 through 5, but I feel like season 6 is when he really started to come into his own and become what I would consider to be like the main character we're following, you know, among others, but he's like the main guy, of course, you know, he's the King of the North. So for him, I painted him in his King of the North outfit, which, you know, I just didn't want to do the standard, you know, Night's Watch robes that a lot of people paint their Jon Snow figures in. I wanted to do something different. So a tough task for me was making these characters. A lot of them have armor that kind of drapes down into their legs, and I had to do that for like 5 or 6 of these figures, and I did not know how I was going to tackle that. Going into the showcase. But for this one, for Jon Snow, I decided to, and for all of these figures, I decided to do something that I was kind of previously considering, but it actually turned out a lot better than I thought it would. And that's, I took the Clone Trooper from the Clone Wars waist cape pieces, and I took armor pieces, like just standard armor pieces, and I sanded and I cut elements off of them, and I sanded the skirt piece down heavily, and I kind of put a layer of sculpting in between the armor and the waist cape to kind of create like one long body of armor. And I think I really just like the look of it. If we kind of will focus in on the armor there, you can just see the whole crisscross and then dot, you know, metallic dot pattern that I did all around it. You know, I really think that turned out pretty nice looking. And then I also sculpted a belt right here, which I painted some details onto. You can see like the little part on his chest right here where he's got the little Winterfell or the little Stark lions, which are very, very just like kind of like scribbles, honestly, at that small of a scale. But I still think they do their job well. And then just more of the line pattern on his torso. You can see his arms. He's got tan arms, which have the little stitching pattern painted into them, and then of course the continuation of the armor pattern down here onto the bottom of the waist cape. Same thing on the back of him. You can see he's got it kind of continuing under the hair, but I've got an alternate face for him, so I want to kind of preserve the surprise of that. But he's got just continuation of the of that stitching pattern, or not stitching, the continuation of the armor pattern just painted on here. You know, the little crisscross thing and the dots, and then the back of his belt. On this side, you can see he's got the stitching pattern continued onto this arm, as well as Longclaw, which is a Brick Arms. What's it called? What's the name of the sword? There's some name for it. I can't remember what kind of sword it is. Just a Brick Arms sword, which is painted in a metallic silver. And then I also painted the little. I tried sculpting it, but I realized the sculpt was horrendous right after I applied it, so I just scraped it all off and just painted it instead. But the little wolf, wolf thing that's kind of sculpted into the, or that's kind of carved into the handle of the blade, or the handle of the sword, is just painted in white down here. That's just kind of to resemble that little wolf thing that he's got at the bottom of his sword there. His hair is a barred hairpiece from The Hobbit, which I didn't really paint at all because it was already black. His face is, of course, the standard elf face, you know, from Lord of the Rings, which you can see I painted the beard on. I really like the way the beard looks. I painted some bags under his eyes to kind of resemble the sad, sunken look that Jon Snow has a lot. And then I just painted some scars on his face, one kind of by the side of his eye there, and then one kind of below his eye, and then another above his eyebrow. And then I also painted, no, that should be it. Oh yeah, just painted a little crease line above his eyes, just kind of, you know, better captures likeness. So there is the King of the North, and also, one of my main reasons for choosing this face actually was the fact that it had, you know, the sad look on the front side and then a very angry look on the other side. And it actually allowed me to perfectly achieve something that I really wanted to do going into this figure, which was to make him an alternate Battle of the Bastards face, just kind of covered in blood and dirt and everything. So that's exactly what I did. It was a little annoying trying to recreate the beard, as the beard did like to rub off a lot. You can see I think I did a decent job recreating it, but even, you can see part of the goatee, part of the beard right there is already rubbed off just from me swapping the heads, or just from me swapping it back and forth, you know, a couple of different times, you know, so it's not really made to last, you know, covering a painted face, or a face with this much detail into it, over a hairpiece is it's a little hard to maintain all the detail on both faces, and it's hard to keep it intact, but I do my best. But you can see, other than the beard, he's just drenched in blood and dirt stains, which are accurate to the show. I was using a picture of Jon from the Battle of the Bastards scene, and he's got 3 prominent blood stains on the sides of his face, one on each side, and then one on his forehead there, and then he's just got some dirt dry brushed onto there as well. So, other than the fact that I have to touch up that goatee a little bit now, I think this looks really good, and I think if I ever do like a Game of Thrones battle mock, I'll probably put Jon in there with this face, because I think it captures his look very well from the Battle of the Bastards. So, there is Jon Snow, the King in the North. Next up is Tyrion Lannister, who we can actually get a closer look at because, of course, he's got the short legs, so we can kind of zoom in a little bit more for him. But he's painted in, I should say, all of these figures really are painted in their Season 7 outfits, because I began work on these guys before Season 8 premiered while I was still rewatching the show. So they're all painted in their Season 7 outfits, which is kind of, you know, it's a modern look for them, but it's not as modern as it could be, because of course, you know, some of them do change looks in Season 8, but I'm just going to keep them the way I have them, because I think even the ones that do look different in Season 8, I prefer their Season 7 looks anyway. But for Tyrion, in I think a couple of the episodes, he wears this black and blue striped vest type thing. He wears a lot of vests in the show, and I thought this had a cool look to it. I originally tried to paint him in one where he was wearing, he had a bunch of rubber nipples almost poking out, just a bunch of rubber dots just kind of jutting out from the vest, and it was, it was black on black, so it wasn't super interesting in terms of the colors, and I was doing all the dots in a dark gray color, so it just looked like a very bland and boring figure, so I decided to switch it up and do this vest instead, or this striped one instead. And as you can see, he's just got all the little different blue stripes painted on a black torso, and then kind of, his belt right here, which is painted on. The belt was actually last minute. It wasn't until I saw, I think Legomatic9 posted his Tyrion figure on Instagram, and I realized, shoot, I never even painted a belt on mine. I should probably go back and add that. So I added the belt kind of last minute. He's got brown shoes painted on. You can see he's got his little Hand of the King, or of the Queen, I should say, badge thing painted on right there. His neckline, you can see he's got the continuation of the vest kind of going up to his collar. You can see on his arms, he's got just this is supposed to be a little gray line. He's got this on both sides, kind of going up the length. Just supposed to show a crease or a little stitching pattern in the leather or whatever. But he's got a little part of the vest that kind of comes out and covers his arms. Vests kind of have a little continuation of the arm type thing, or it sticks out a little bit past just the torso line. It's hard to explain, but it's kind of he's got if you look at reference pictures, he's kind of got that part of the vest sticking out onto his arms. So that's what this little blue striped pattern continuation is supposed to be. It's like a continuation of the vest. If we turn to his back, you can see he's just got a continuation of the blue striped pattern along with his belt. Continued on the back there, and then the collar of his vest right there, with just some gray lines kind of going up the length of it. And then the continuation of his brown shoes. I should say continuation more. Then if we go on to his face, his hair and head. His hair is actually the Bilbo Baggins hair, which has been painted, or it's been heavily dry brushed in a brown color to kind of resemble the dirty brownish blonde type thing that he's got going. And then his face is the same face that I used for my last Tyrion figure, which I think actually does a good job resembling him, and that's of Lucius Malfoy from the Harry Potter series of sets from 2010. And as you can see, I've painted his I've painted the beard on in like a dark brown, and I try to make it look a little scraggly, a little dirty and gross. And you can see he's just got some lines kind of on the side of his face to show his, his likeness. Then I painted the scars on. You can see I'll take the head off so it's easier to see them. But you can see one is kind of painted above the eyebrow right there. One's painted, if I focus in a little bit, one's kind of painted underneath the eye. And then I think I skipped the one that would be by his nose, because I think it's for the most part covered up by his beard in the reference pictures I was using, so I think I just skipped that one. But yeah, overall, I think I did a decent job with the likeness for this guy. I've always thought this head is good for Peter Dinklage, and I think it looks. I'm really happy with it. I think this is a cool little final season's look for Tyrion. So yeah, very dark and brooding compared to, that's a word he would use, brooding. It's very dark and brooding compared to his earlier season's look. So yeah, there is Tyrion Lannister. Spoiler alert for those who aren't caught up, the last surviving Lannister in Game of Thrones. Next up, of course, we have Arya Stark, who I've said numerous times in the past is my favorite character in the entire series. I love the character arc she's gone through. I love how she's evolved over the course of the series from, small little girl who, just wanted to learn how to, fight with swords, just wanted to be a tough tomboy type character, to being one of the most feared assassins in all of Westeros, who, spoiler alert, ended up defeating the Night King. Yeah, I really love what they've done with her character, and I've said in the past I want her to sit on the Iron Throne. I don't still feel that way, because I don't really think it's in her character. She doesn't really want the Iron Throne, she just wants revenge. So assuming we get an ending that, something to do with, like, maybe Jon becoming king of Westeros or whatever, I hope she gets, like, a prominent role if she survives to the end. Like, not like, I don't want her to rule with him, but maybe, like, the leader of the Kingsguard or something like that, or maybe she trains a new group of assassins, or, she, like, kind of starts and trains a bunch of new Kingsguard members or something like that. I want her to have some sort of prominent warrior role because of how fierce and awesome and badass she is. But she's painted, I should say all of these figures actually are painted in their Season 7 outfits. What I did with her to kind of differentiate her from the other Arya figures that are painted in the same outfit that she's wearing, which is kind of like her Winterfell Season 7 type outfit, is I painted on this I sculpted and then painted this little gray cloak, this little gray winter cloak thing that she's wearing. It's hard to describe it. It's like just this weird tattered cloth she kind of wears in the later episodes of Season 7, and then a little bit in Season 8 as well. And I'm actually pretty happy with how that turned out. Like I said, I think it differentiates this Arya from other Arya figures out there. But if we start with her torso, you can just see, it's kind of hard to see under the light. I just said, you can see it's kind of hard to see, but... but yeah, I painted on the lines in a dark brown, on a regular brown torso, which shows up just fine in real life, but on camera it's a little hard to tell under the light. But as you can tell, it's like, if you can maybe see it, just got, just like that stitching pattern, and it even continues onto her arm, which is very subtle, but under the light you can kind of see it. Then the black stitching pattern that kind of, brings the two halves together, and then you can see her belt right here with the little belt buckle, and that continues down into the skirt piece with some light gray creases painted into that, and then like the little seam in the skirt which is what this black and brown line is right here. She's got dark brown shoes painted on, and then just kind of brown painted onto the legs. A lot of brown on this figure. You can see the back of the sculpt. for the cloak that she's wearing, the cloak I was talking about, where I painted this like X pattern that's kind of stitched into it. So the painting that wasn't very fun, but it's the back of a tattered cloak, so I wasn't too concerned with how, you know, symmetrical the lines were, how clean it looked, because it's supposed to just be like a dirty cloak that she's wearing, so I wasn't too concerned with that. But I kind of the back sculpt of this didn't turn out super smooth, so I had to sand it down a little bit, and I think I sanded it down fairly well. I think it looks pretty smooth now, pretty flush with the figure. You can see the stitching pattern kind of continued onto this arm as well, and then the cloak, actually I sculpted a little bit onto this arm. So if we turn, you can all see the front of the cloak right here, which is kind of draped over this part of her arm. A lot of line work, just a lot of crisscross lining in this figure. You know, it's a lot of stuff that I don't really need to point out, you can just kind of see it. Her face is the Ginny Weasley face, which I have tried my best to erase the dimples and then painted on the eyebrows in a dark brown. She's wearing black gloves, of course. Her hair sculpt, I think, turned out very well. It's inspired by Legomatic 9s. It was completely sculpted from, there was no base, it was just completely from scratch. It's kind of almost like a miniature version or a smaller version of the Qui-Gon hairpiece. So you can see it kind of, you know, her hair is like braided back like that. And then it kind of continues, you know, it kind of comes to the front right there. And then there's also this little braid in the back right here. So I sculpted that on with green stuff and then just painted that brown. And then she also does have needle for her weapon, which, as you can tell, is a Brick Arms little cutlass, I think is the name of the sword, which I painted the blade silver, and then I sanded down these pieces on both sides, as you can tell, because it was like fully rounded, but I sanded it down a little bit. And then painted the handle all gold, and then these two pieces were just sticking flat out, but I kind of broke them, or I bent them a little bit, and then glued them firmly in place. They're kind of, you know, doing that like the down and then up type thing that sword handles kind of have sometimes. It's hard to explain it, but I think it looks pretty cool. Then of course this little hand rail or hand guard thing is also painted in gold. So very complex figure. Yeah, I just took 5 minutes explaining her, but this was the last one I finished just because of all of the line work and everything that had to go into her. And as she is my favorite character, I wanted to put a ton of work into her, and I'm really happy with the way Arya Stark turned out. So, yep, there she is. A girl has no name. Unless that girl is Arya Stark. Which doesn't make any sense. But she's just that badass. Because she's Arya Stark. Moving right along is Daenerys Targaryen, of course, or as we now know her, spoiler alert for if you're not caught up, the Mad Queen. A lot of people took issue with her character turn. I think, you know, she's a Targaryen. They've been alluding to it for seasons. It maybe happened a little sudden, but I think it was a great direction to take her character in, and I don't really have a problem with it. I actually really love it. It was kind of one of the more intriguing parts of episode 5, if you ask me, honestly. But she's painted in this gray dress that she kind of wears through a lot of season 7. You can see it's just kind of, you know, it's just details of a dress painted on. It's not really a ton to explain. You can see the little, her skin kind of showing through the collar right there, and then that the dress also does continue onto her neckline. It's kind of hard to tell, but I did paint the gray and then the black lining onto the neck of the figure's head. I sculpted the little pauldron things that kind of stick out onto her shoulders right there. And then she also does have a little bit of an opening in the sleeves, so that's also what I painted on to the front of the arms right there. You can see her little dragon sash type thing, that's the little metallic chain of it is kind of draped across her torso. If we go to the back, you can kind of, actually if I take her hair is going to come with it because it's an older headpiece. You can see I've actually sculpted part of the sash right here, and that continues onto the back of the torso, which we'll just leave her head off for a second so I can also show you the back details, which is just the crease in the dress, the little sculpted sash right here, and then the continued chain piece of it. And then just some more creases in the back of the torso, just kind of like the front of the torso, you know, not too much detail, you know, but just enough to get the point across. Her face is from Pirates of the Caribbean. I believe it's Elizabeth Swann's face, because I think it resembles her fairly well. And then her hairpiece is just a standard hairpiece, you know, standard female hairpiece, because her hairstyles are so complex, and I did not want to sculpt it at all. And I figured this hairpiece was close enough to the point where it'll get the job done, while, even though it's not super accurate, you know, it'll at least look enough like Daenerys to be passable. So I think it does a pretty decent job, you know, resembling the way she does her hair in this season. And overall, I think this is a pretty good figure and a much better representation of her than my last one. Rather than using the standard Lego dress piece that they've been using for years, which is like the 2-stud high sloped brick, I wanted to use the new sloped dress piece that they introduced with like the Praetorian Guards, but I couldn't find them on Bricklink at all unless I wanted to buy the full figure, which I did not want to do. So I came up with a solution where instead of stacking one of those bricks, I just took one brick high slope and then two 1x2 plates, because that's actually the same length of a minifigure's legs, so she wouldn't look taller than a standard figure like she would if I used the other traditional dress piece where it's the 2 brick high slope piece, if you know what I'm saying. When you do it like this, she's actually remains the same length as a normal figure would. So I did the same technique for Cersei as well, and I think it actually ended up looking pretty cool. And I think the paint on here, it does a good job blending. Like, it doesn't like stand out too much. I think the paint looks pretty solid. There's no like it just looks pretty clean. I'm happy with the way it turned out. So just kind of turn it around, take one more look at the back and the sash, and yeah, there is Daenerys Targaryen, or as I said, the Mad Queen. Next up, of course, we have the Night King. I think a lot of you guys are gonna really love. I personally really love him. He was actually the first one I started working on. Wasn't the first one I finished, but he was one of the first ones I started working on. I'm really happy with the way he turned out. I did the same technique I did for Jon Snow with him, where I took an armor piece and I took one of the clone waist cape pieces and then sculpted in between them to kind of create like a long flowing, or like, you know, one long body of armor. And it was actually the first one I tried this technique on, believe it or not. I actually didn't start with Jon Snow, I started with this guy. But unlike the other ones, he doesn't have a little gap in the armor, so I couldn't like leave this little space open, so I had to sculpt onto there. So you can see I just kind of sculpted a little bit onto this, and then I painted some black lines, because that's, you know, what the actual armor looks like. He's just got these you know, these horizontal lines going through the little waist part of his armor. And then his torso, or rather than his torso, I should say his armor, was very complex, because I had to paint these little triangular looking patterns of metal, and then a bunch of black dots following it. So it's just a lot of black dots, followed by some little metal sheets or some little metallic little areas of armor, and then this little weird thing kind of coming down there at the top. And just a lot of dots on the side of his torso. You can see some painting on the side of his arms with some little arm pads, and then some black lines, and that's on both arms if I move this arm down. As you can see there, I think they look pretty symmetrical. It's kind of hard to tell, but I think the paint on both of those looks pretty good. He's got blue hands, of course, and then black shoes. The continuation of the armor on both the back of the armor piece and then on the back of the leg pauldron, or not pauldron, the leg cape. And you can see the painting on the back of the torso looks pretty nice. Just a lot of dots once again. And then the shoulder armor, the shoulder pads. His spear that he uses, of course, to, spoiler alert, take down Viserion in season 7, which is just a standard Lego spear, which has been sanded to like a finer point right here, and then painted a mix of light gray and light blue. So it's not wanting to focus, but those are the paints I mixed to get that icy looking color. And then his face was a standard yellow face, and then Darth Maul horns that I painted both in a light blue, and then completely painted the face from scratch. So you can see he's got some, you know, his eyes, and then I think he's got light blue pupils as well, and then some, if I can maybe zoom in a little bit and get a better look at that. And then you see I painted the mouth on, and then just some different lines in his face to show, you know, more of a skeletal look. He's got some evil looking eyebrows and some kind of crystals forming on his cheeks right there. And then I didn't know what details to do for the back of the head, so I just did this little weird triangular looking pattern just to I don't even know, to show like maybe somewhat of a bony structure. I'm not entirely sure what I was going for there, but I think I did a decent job just kind of capturing, you know, you're just kind of, you know, putting in some extra detail there. But yeah, overall, I think the end of the Night King may have been somewhat disappointing. I was pretty happy with it at first, but the more I thought about it, I was like, yeah, maybe that episode could have been a little bit better, or maybe they could have, maybe they didn't have to resolve it so quickly. But overall, I think he was still a pretty menacing force in the series, and I think it's never really been about the White Walkers anyway. It's always been more about the conflict between the houses. So it's in some weird way, I'm kind of alright with it. But yeah, there is the Night King. Very proud of this figure, and I think he's definitely one of the best of the showcase. So there he is. Next up, we have Jaime Lannister, who is probably by default my least favorite of the showcase. Not that he's bad at all. But just because he required a lot of sculpting for the armor that he's wearing, and I'm not necessarily that good at making that sculpt symmetrical. But if we just start with the detail on him, his torso, as you can see, he's got the same technique used, you know, the armor and then the armor piece and the waist cape piece with the sculpting in between to connect the two. He's got, you know, just this standard, you know, his King's, I don't know if this is his Kingsguard armor. I think this is just like standard Lannister armor he's wearing. That's all painted on. I'm not even going to go over all the details, you know, it's just, you know, this like breastplate, which is in a dark red color and then outlined by gold, and then he's got like, you know, this little golden thing up here, this little gold pattern by his neckline. He's got a brown belt sculpted and painted on, as well as these little knee pad looking things that kind of swing, or that kind of hang down in front of his knees onto the waist cape thing right here. And if you can see on his arms, he's got some more, this is what I'm talking about, not super symmetrical, but he's got some more arm pads or whatever sculpted on, and then onto the back of his elbows. Same thing on this side, with his golden hand, of course. You know, I also painted a little bit of black onto the arm, or onto the upper part of the hand, to kind of show that the sleeve is draping down over the hand. You see the back of the armor, the back of the plate, or the chest plate thing that he's wearing, which is kind of painted in, it's painted a little bit smaller than it was on the front. I didn't realize that till after the fact, and I didn't want to go back and change it. And then just kind of the collar of his, or just kind of the collar of the shirt he's wearing, or the armor, or whatever. And then the back of the belt, and then on this little waist cape piece, he's got some very subtle gray lines to show creasing in the leather. He's got this sword right here, which is just, whoops, these figures like to come unfocused occasionally. The sword, which is just kind of a standard brick arm sword, which is just painted in a metallic silver. The blade at least is. The handle I just left alone, because the pictures I was using, it was just standard dark, or like a standard gunmetal gray. His face is a face from the main guy from Prince of Persia, with just some more facial details painted on, as well as the sideburns for his hair, because I tried 5 different times, I believe 5 different times, to sculpt the sideburns onto the hair sculpt, and they just came out looking dreadful. So every single time, so I just painted them on instead, because I think that looked a lot better. And then the hair sculpt itself isn't that great. I think it's okay. It definitely could be better, but I just did not want to go back and re-sculpt it again. I think it does a decent job. I might just, at some point, I might just do what everybody else did, and rather than sculpt it, just swap it out with, you know, the standard Mutt Williams hairpiece, just paint it in a dirty blonde type color, because that would probably look better than this. But I wanted mine to look a little bit different, so I tried it out, and it's not perfect, but I think it looks alright at least. But yeah, there is the Kingslayer from Game of Thrones. I think he looks pretty good. Like I said, probably my least favorite of the showcase, just due to the fact that my sculpting abilities did not allow me to achieve his armor the best way I would have liked to, but overall I still think he's a fairly decent figure. So there is Jaime Lannister. Next up, we have Cersei Lannister, who I believe was actually the first figure I finished in this showcase, because she is pretty simple overall. If we start with her dress, she just got some lines painted, you know, the creases, the stitching pattern of the dress painted on. Just, you know, some simple lines going up and down the length of her torso and legs, you know, or the skirt piece. So really fairly simple there, and then just some figure lines on the side right here. I put one of these little pauldron pieces on to kind of resemble the armor that she's wearing. She's wearing this like weird little armored decorative piece of metal in the reference pictures I was using. It was something that she wears in season 7. And then I kind of continued it with paint onto the torso, and I just painted some various black dots and lines to kind of resemble the details of it, and then some black lines in the little rivets in this part just to kind of show more detail, of course. Her face is just like an angry female face, a standard one that I ordered in bulk off Bricklink, so I couldn't tell you, where I got it from. And then I just painted a tiny little mole on right there, kind of on the side of her face, just to capture Lena Headey's likeness, because she has a mole there. And then her hairpiece, I'm actually really proud of what I did. It was I think like the Shakespearean guy, or like some sort of, he was like some sort of Roman figure from the CMF series, where he already had this silver crown painted on. So I thought not only did the hairstyle look a lot like Cersei, but it also already had the crown sculpted right into it. All I had to do was just basically continue that sculpt onto the front, which I did with this. You can see the top of the crown in the front right there, which is like this little metallic little silver little sphere thing with some lines kind of carved into it and whatnot, and it's just kind of like a very standard, very kind of basic continuation of the pattern that the official hairpiece already had into it. I really just had to sculpt the front, so like I said, not only did the hairpiece look a lot like Cersei, but it also already had the sculpt right into it, so it was like a match made in heaven. So I really like the way that turned out. If we just go back to the back of her torso, you can just see some more figure lines, the continuation of that metal thing going down, and then some lines in just the stitching of the dress, which is kind of not showing up well in the light. There we go. But yeah, very standard for the back of her torso. And then all that's really left is a last minute detail I added. Literally last night I made this, which is a goblet, which actually is turned upside down. This would be the normal way that the goblet would work, but I cut the top part of it off and sanded it down and made her hold it the other way, so that this way, this part is the base. If we can get it to actually focus. That's the way this part is the base, and then the bottom part is actually the cup part of the goblet. So I just wanted to I felt like Lego's version was a little too large, and I wanted to just downsize it a little bit. So there is Cersei Lannister, the previous Mad Queen. Moving on to our penultimate figure of the showcase, we have Brienne of Tarth, who I kind of painted, or I decided to make, thanks to my friend Tossy Figs, who convinced me to make her as like an accessory to the Hound, because of course they have a little bit of a beef, or they have a little bit of a history going, starting in season 4. And yeah, I really like the way she turned out. She actually ended up being one of my cleaner and more fun figures to paint, because really a majority of her was just using black, dark gray, and metallic paint. What I did with her and the Hound is actually I made both their legs at the exact same time, because this was simultaneously my second and third time ever making extended legs, the first time being on my VM Varga from Fargo. If you want a method on how to do that, Legomatic 9 has a great tutorial video on that. So I made those, and I painted them, as you can see, in a, well, it is kind of hard to see, actually. I painted them in a dark tan for the legs, and then dark brown for the boots. I did the same armor technique, which is, of course, the skirt piece, as well as the armor piece with sculpting to connect the two. You can see on the skirt piece, it's just a lot of metallic dots, because that's kind of what she has on the armor. And then just some, like, this gray line to kind of show, I don't know, I think like a crease in it or something. I'm not entirely sure what that is. Yeah, the dots continue onto the side and then onto the back of her armor as well. And then her armor itself is just kind of a lot of gray lines, just this kind of triangular pattern she has going on there. You see the arm pads, that's supposed to be the outline of the arm, or the shoulder pads or whatever right here. And then this part, which is kind of like, I'm trying to point it all out, but really simply put, it's just the pattern of her armor. I don't really have to explain it. It's just the pattern that was on her armor when I was looking at reference pictures, and I just replicated it onto the figure. So with that being said, we can just kind of, just kind of in silence now. Let's just kind of observe what I painted. You can see in the back just some more of that pattern, and then I painted some buckles right there on, 2 on each side, just kind of show the what fastens her armor to her torso. Her arm paint, or the pattern on her arms, didn't come off as clean as it did on the Night King, but I still like it. You just see 6 dots on this side, and then the continuation of the arm pads, or of the shoulder pads, and then 6 dots on this side, continuation of the shoulder pads. Not as symmetrical as it was on the Night King, but I still like it. We just take another look at the back of her legs and the back of her shoulder armor, or her torso armor. Her hair was completely sculpted, which I actually really liked the look of. Because she kind of has it slicked back a little bit, so I didn't want to use the Malfoy hairpiece. I wanted, because that has the Widow's Peak on it, so I decided to sculpt it, and I really like the way that turned out. And then just another, actually the same face I used for Cersei, just it's the alternate face for that one. Then I painted on some lines onto it to make her look more stern, and make her look, more serious, to kind of resemble Brienne of Tarth better. And then her sword is that same brick arms blade, but this one I really like, because this one I got to paint in a all gold for the handle, and then silver for the blade, because it kind of, I like it because it stands out more now. The only part that's not painted is the area where she's holding right here, but other than that, the whole rest of the sword is painted. But yeah, I think she turned out pretty clean. She was one of my, not least favorite figures to make, but I thought her armor was going to be very complex, so I wasn't looking forward to making her. But then I looked up reference pictures and I figured out it's actually just it's pretty standard. It's just a lot of, lines and a lot of just line work, and I'm pretty good at doing that when it comes to, especially torsos. So, yeah, I was really happy with the way she turned out, and I really like her, and I'm glad she started off as, like I said, just an accessory for the Hound, but she kind of became one of the more prominent figures of the showcase, so I'm really glad I decided to make her. Thank you, Tossie Fakes, for convincing me to make her, and, yeah, there is Brienne of Tarth. And closing out this video is, of course, Sandor the Hound Clegane, which ended up actually being one of the biggest surprises of the showcase, because I did not expect this figure to turn out as well as it actually did. It's pretty simple, there's not like a lot that's mind-blowing about him, but I think the fact that this is the first time I've ever seen a figure of the Hound not painted in his traditional Kingsguard armor that he wears throughout the first 4 seasons, and the fact that he just looks different and he's wearing a different outfit, I think the originality of that, and I think the fact that I just really like the look of him, I think this is just one of the bigger surprises, because I didn't expect him to turn out as well as he did. Starting with the torso, it's the same technique I keep explaining, this time with a belt sculpted on as well. And his armor is basically just kind of a lot of black and blue, or black and silver dots painted on, kind of like the rubber nipples thing I was telling you about with Tyrion. But instead, these are like little metallic dots kind of sticking out as like little, I don't even know what they are. I'm not even going to try to try to guess what they were. So I just painted those little dots, that little dot pattern going pretty much on the entirety of the armor. You can see the belt sculpted on right there with some, with of course the gold belt buckle and some silver dots painted into it. A little crease in the, or a little opening in the cape right here, or in the little waist cape area. And then a little stitching line going up, and then some buckle fastener type things, or what those little silver dots are supposed to be, or what these little things are supposed to be right here. You can see it kind of goes up to his neck right there, so you can kind of see how the gray continues onto his neck. He's wearing a black he's wearing like a black cloak underneath it, so that's why he's got this black showing right here. You can just see the continuation of the armor pattern on the arms, and then on this little waist cape area, and then the continuation of the black uniform he was wearing underneath. And then just the back of the belt, more of the dots, fairly simple. I chose metallic arms as the base arms because he was wearing chainmail underneath the this little cloak thing, so I wanted it to have like a little bit of a metallic shine underneath. But you can see the dots also continued onto the arms, his sword. I just painted a little gold on the tips of this part right here, and then the blade is painted silver itself. And then yeah, the armor is pretty same continuation, or actually the exact same extended legs as I did for Brienne of Tarth. Same paint job, it's also brown boots, and then I also have dark tan painted on for the legs, so that just kind of by coincidence ended up being the exact same process of making the legs, and then the exact same paint job as well. So that was kind of funny. But if we continue on, you see there's all of his armor again. I'm kind of talking just very, like, you know, sporadically, but it's like this armor is so complex and so weird and so hard to explain that I'm just kind of like saying, oh yeah, there's dots right here and there's dots right there and there's this detail, and I'm just trying to comprehend it to you guys to kind of make it make sense. But his face, I really like the look of his face. I'm gonna see if we can maybe try to zoom in a little bit on it. His face is a angry clone head. It reminded me a lot of making Ray Stussy from Fargo, because I had to sculpt on a hairpiece that was very similar, and I was using the exact same head I used for that figure. I kind of kept the mouth on. I like the scowl thing he's got going. I painted some bags under his eyes, and then I painted his beard on, which I think the beard actually looks very clean, for me at least. I'm not very good at painting beards, but I think that looks very clean. I try to kind of make it look like a chin beard, a very scraggly chin beard type thing that he's got going. His eyebrows also painted brown. You can see like the little patch of hair hanging over his scar right there. If I turn this around slowly, you can kind of see the whole hair sculpt, which I think looks really, really good. I'm really happy with that. And then just painted with a couple layers of pink and a couple layers of just regular skin tone is the scar right there. The scar that he gets, of course, when the mountain pushes his head into the flames. And yeah, I really like the way that looks, and I think yeah, I think it looks very, I try to make it look very blotchy and very like bumpy and not very smooth, because I wanted it to kind of resemble the burnt skin look. I'm really happy with the way that turned out. So I think overall, I think on the likeness I did a really good job with this figure. The lines that are coming out here, the cheekbone lines, I wish I would have erased before I painted on the beard, because those aren't accurate to the actor's likeness at all. I would have liked to repaint those, but I didn't want to try to erase just that little bit, because I thought it might, you know, ruin the work I did on the beard, and I didn't want to do that, so it's no big deal. I just kind of settle for it. But yeah, there is the Hound. Maybe I'll make the mountain for him someday to kind of make those figures, you know, because they kind of go together. But one could argue that that's what I did with Brienne. You know, I mainly just made Brienne so she would go along with the Hound, so I don't really need to make the mountain now. But yeah, maybe if I ever do a part 3, I'll include like the mountain, and maybe I'll make, you know, some of the other characters like Bronn, you know, that I missed out on in this showcase, or Tormund. But who knows, you know, it just kind of depends on if the motivation's there. But for now, I'm pretty satisfied with this wave of figures, and yeah, this was the final one, so let's close out this video. So there you have it, guys. There are my LEGO Game of Thrones custom painted minifigures part 2. Let me know what your favorite one is down in the comments. If I had to pick a personal favorite, I think it'd probably be somewhere between like Jon Snow, Arya Stark, and then probably the Night King. I think there's elements of all of them though that make them stand out and make me really, really, you know, like them. And I think there's elements of all of them that kind of, you know, that I have a preference for. So I think really they're all. I think it's a pretty solid. I think it's a pretty solid group of figures that I've got for the showcase, and yeah, I'm really excited. I'm interested to see how the series is going to end tonight. It's going to be a little bittersweet, but yeah, I'm excited. So comment down below your fan theories, or if the finale's already aired, comment what your favorite moment was. I'm going to leave the comments, can be completely spoiler filled, I don't care. So just avoid the comments if you're not caught up, I suppose. But yeah, so I hope you guys enjoyed these figures. As far as showcases coming up, I've got a couple of finished figures that I want to show off. You know, just single figures from, like, you know, movies and shows and whatnot that aren't, you know, part of that they're not part of like a big showcase, or just one, you know, singular figure I made. And then I've also got, I'm planning on making some figures from the Netflix miniseries Maniac. That's going to be my next, I'm only making 2 characters from it, so it's not going to be a huge showcase, but that's going to be my next mini project. And then I'm going to start, hopefully this summer, with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood coming out. I'm going to go back and watch all of Tarantino's movies, and I'm planning on doing a couple series of Tarantino figures. Like, I have a roster of 4 characters from Inglourious Basterds I want to make. I have a couple from Reservoir Dogs I'm considering. Yeah, so stay tuned for those guys. That'll probably be what, you know, those will be my coming figure showcases. But yeah, until next time, guys, thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next one. Peace out.